So thankfully, it's a short presentation. Really, I want it to be throwing out an idea, and then we have a discussion about it. I talk with my hands, so if I go like that and you can't hear me, just let me know. So my name is Phil Arcuria. I work in actionable analytics, and today I want to talk a little bit about this challenge that we all have, and that is, how do we make our lives easier and not repeat the same thing over and over again? Which is, who could tell me real quickly the story of Sisyphus? You know. Exactly. Yeah. So very different variants of the story, but basically he cheated death. The gods weren't happy about it. So when he finally went to the underworld, every day he'd have to roll a boulder to the top of the hill and it would roll back down. So not a good fate, not as bad as Prometheus though. So he had his liver pecked out every day for giving humans fire. So this is the way I see extracting data is, boy, we do so much of the same thing day after day. We think we're pretty good, it rolls back down. So here's the presenting problem, at least as I see it, is we have a very large data community and we're all doing very similar things, but it's pretty independent for the most part. And so there's a lot of things that we do over and over. I know just personally I've done, or my team's done over basic stuff like, can I figure out which student has indicated that they are Black or African-American on any of the sources of information, or just FTFYS students, full-time first-year students, little bits of code that we've had to write over and over again. So at worst right now, even within my own group, but surely across our collective groups, there's a lot of duplication of effort. That's best case scenario. Worst case scenario, not only we're duplicating effort, but we're defining things slightly different ways. So when we have leadership that gets reports from different units, they don't always reconcile. Also, we've had a lot of new staff on my team, and it makes it really hard to train when there's no standardized little bits of code out there, even again, for simple things that if you've been here a while, but if someone brand new, especially brand new to higher education, I haven't been the smartest about that, as my team knows. So sometimes I've had to redo the same kind of training exercise over and over because I just didn't save it or put it in a standardized form. So the idea here, and this borrows from what Josh started with the SQL snippets, is let's try to capture this collective knowledge in little bits of code or little Alteryx snippets. So the idea is to basically address all those issues I talked about, reduce duplication of effort, overlay some sort of standardization, but also make it a heck of a lot easier to train and onboard new staff. I think the hardest learning curve for anyone on my team, at least, is the data learning curve. So we could teach them a lot of the other things. They pick them up pretty quickly. But our data are complicated. They're not always well documented. You could have several tables that look like they have the same exact field in there that are slightly different, et cetera. So, and again, shout out to Josh and what he's done with the SQL snippets. It's very analogous to that. What I do want to stress, though, is that this would be purely voluntary. So as people have the time and expertise to contribute, if you don't have time to contribute, you could at least benefit from the work of others. So here's the idea I want to throw out, and then it's me done talking, and I want to talk this through with all of you to see what your thoughts are. So anyone can create it. So there's no kind of gatekeeping in terms of who can create these. So think of it as very open source. I follow the same format that you put together, Josh, for SQL snippets for consistency. So whenever you created an Alteryx snippet, you'd put some basic information. Actually, I should pause. I'm making an assumption. Is everyone familiar with Alteryx? If you're not, raise your hand and we'll start there. Okay, great. Thank you. So Alteryx is a tool that we use across the data community to really do the extraction, transformation, and sometimes loading of the data. So some folks like to do it in straight SQL. Some folks like to do it in other tools that we've used in the past, but the primary tool that we use is Alteryx. But you could use Power BI or something else. So it's a very GUI based interface. So even though you could write everything in SQL, it's really helpful if you don't know SQL beyond some basics, because you could grab in different tools to do different things. So the idea here is that we would create these little itty bits of Alteryx that just do really simple things, and then we could share those out. So the idea is anyone could create it. You would just put together some basic information, describe what this little snippet of Alteryx workflow does, who contributed, last file dated, and run date. I also added to this, I just didn't put it in the slides, I forgot, is a validation by, which is, I'll talk a little bit about in a moment. So whoever created it would just provide some simple instructions of what to do. So change the term code in here, maybe you have to tweak this, etc. But just a little bit of breadcrumbs on what to do. Then the biggest drawback of doing this versus, say, the SQL snippets is our Alteryx workflows save our credentials. And so for data security, we don't want to just be passing snippets back and forth without addressing that. So one step would just be, you could just go in there and just delete your password and type in temp and resave it. It'll still save everything in your workflow. It'll just protect it from someone running it using your credentials. Then we would put an entry in a very simple Google Doc that just basically has those 4 or 5 bits of information that I talked about before. And then we could drop it in some to be determined Slack channel that says, hey, I just created this. It's out there for anyone to use. Oh, if anyone has time, can they validate it? So here's just a real simple illustration of how you could delete your user ID. Like I said, it's very simple. You just go in there, you delete it out. You could type in anything, but I just put in temp. All right, here's the words are probably a little hard to read, but basically this is just that simple Google sheet I was just talking about. I just put 2 examples that I'm going to walk through here in a second, but I think this would be great as a nice inventory. If you're looking for a snippet, you could pull this up, scan it real quick and see, oh, yep, there's something in there I could use. No. Or if there's something you're working on that says, you know what, someone else might benefit for this. It hasn't already been done. I'm going to add it to the list. All right, let me go through two quick examples. So here's one that dynamically pulls the current term. So lots of times I've had to go into a dashboard or a workflow and update the term or forget to update the term. And so as part of our data mart project, we built a term table, makes it real easy so you could dynamically pull the current term code that we're in. So that's all this snippet does, is it goes in to that term object that we that we built. And just based off of the current date and the start and end date of the term, it just pulls that S term code out of there. And then it just pushes it into a dynamic input tool within Alteryx. And then you could use that dynamic input tool for anything that you need as your kind of starting point. So again, really simple, basic, but something that I had to do many times in the past, or like I said, I wouldn't program it dynamically because I think I was saving time when in essence I wasn't. But this is what our team uses, and we pass back and forth. Anybody needs it, they know, they go to the folder, they just grab it and they run with it. Another example is full-time first-year students as of census, which is another one that we get asked very frequently for. So similar, it's very simple. It just goes into the census student term enrollment. You just have to update the term code. I didn't make this one dynamic because sometimes we're looking not just current, but historically. And then it pulls those students. Really basic, but something that we reuse over and over and over again. So that's kind of all for me setting the idea. And now I just wanted to discuss get your thoughts on whether this is even worth embarking. If not, you won't hurt my feelings. We'll still do it as our little unit. If so, that's great. How best can we set this up so it's actually beneficial? Before I go to that though, any questions about kind of the idea here? So if you've done object-oriented programming, it's very analogous to that of, hey, let's not write the same bit of code over and over again. Let's just write, those little snippets of code and call them. This, we wouldn't be calling them, and be grabbing them and pasting them in there. All right. So first off, is this even worth doing as a collective effort? Yes. All right. I like the emphatic yes too. All right. So moved, right? What I like about it too is we're all really, really busy. And so I think what's key is that it's purely voluntary and it's as you have time. And what I'm hoping, at least like with us, we have probably 15 of these built, and it's just because it's come up over time. It's not that we strategically said, all right, over the next 6 months, we're going to build these. So it's really, I think, serendipitous. As you create things, you could just add them in there. So I'm not trying to create additional workload. All right. So I'm glad you have that enthusiasm. I feel the same way. I hate doing things over and over again. So my question to you is, I just threw out that sketch of a process. But quite frankly, I don't care what the process is, as long as it's something that we think is sustainable and will give us the desired results. So here's some questions that I really want to throw out to you. What do you think of the process? What are there better ways? Josh, what are things we could learn from the SQL snippet, approach? How can we spur participation? I mean, if we need to like gamify this and create a leaderboard, I'll create a leaderboard. I'll give prizes. I mean, whatever you guys think, I'm willing to do. And then other, kind of just housekeeping things of, where should these be saved? Do we want to create a channel for this, or just kind of co-opt this with the Alteryx channel that we could put updates in there, et cetera. So now I'm going to open up to all of you. Thoughts? How can we bring this into fruition? Josh.
Okay, so spurring participation is probably the most crucial. I've learned that if you make something voluntary and everyone's busy, if you make something voluntary and everyone's busy, you're going to be the only one adding to it. Okay, so that's what's happened with the SQL repo. Created by Josh. A few extra inputs there. I do like the additional metadata you're capturing to create like the directory. Long term, I'd like to probably integrate that with the portal, Calibra, bring in some lineage. So not only is it going to show you here's what it does, but maybe you can get directed to more information about the assets being used to create it. So if you don't know what that table is and why it's being used that way, you can go into Calibra or whatever and find out directly. We could leverage the Alteryx Slack channel. We could leverage the user groups. We could potentially like give awards for participation at the user group meeting, something like that. My biggest concern is one of the examples was literally just a SQL snippet in an input tool with the browse tool. So there's a lot of overlap potentially between the SQL snippets repository and this. And at what point do we have duplication? If someone puts it in both, the SQL snippet gets updated, but the Alteryx workflow doesn't. How much value is in the Alteryx workflow beyond just the SQL? That kind of stuff.
Yeah, all good points. What's everyone's thoughts to Josh's point of people don't do voluntary? So I have mixed, because as I just said a moment ago, we're busy, right? The last thing you want to do is task people out. Then this room will probably get pretty small pretty quick. But also want to learn from your experience with the SQL snippet. So any thoughts on that? So yeah. So for those of you online, Mark had lots of good thoughts and questions. So to your last point, Mark, in terms of how do we maintain this? And well, to your first point, should we merge this with the SQL snippets project? And I say, yeah, to the degree that it makes sense, let's do so. I mean, obviously with your thoughts, Josh, don't want to kind of co-opt on your project, but I think the more that we could put things in the same format in the same places and have them being complementary, the better. In term to your latter point, it's whatever we want to do. So no rules. So wherever we want to put this, however we want to document it, is totally up to us, and not just in this room, but as we share this out with our colleagues, et cetera. So I would say no constraints. Yeah, that's a great point. And that about the definitions. Mark brought up.
Yeah, I mean, we have to think about, do you want to keep old definitions around for historical use? Then we have to probably say, okay, a way to tag that I have done a similar thing for a library. I do required reporting. We have lots of required reports. So I ended up making a whole database and a web app around it because I just realized all those issues. We tried it with tables in the past and stuff, and all these things eventually it gets really confusing for everyone. And so, yeah, I'm really for it. And I'd like to help, but.
Well, I'll take you up on that offer, Mark. So maybe Mark, you, Josh, and I, and anyone else wants to, we could put some more thought just in terms of kind of design and structure. And how much more time do we have, Delaney? Oh, plenty of time. Okay. So other thoughts. Hold on. I'm going to try to get better about this.
So while this sounds great, my big question would be, how do you vet, or somewhere in the metadata, do you put how that was vetted? So that if anyone can put it there, how do we know that it's right?
That's an excellent question. And I kind of went back and forth on that of, do you want to restrict who can contribute, which then you have to go through and identify who's the SME. And we have official SMEs. And then we also have, well, this may not be the official SME, but they've been doing it for 10 years and they probably know it. So my initial thought, which may or may not be the best path forward, is we just have a validated by. So someone creates it, and then we ping whoever we think is kind of the SME in that area and say, can you please look this over? Anyone who wants to use it before it's validated, fine, but use at your own risk. And then if it's been validated, it really has the stamp of however much you trust that person, so to speak, right? So like, several things in open source. Other thoughts?
Just along those same lines would be, how often is it re-evaluated or validated, or what triggers it to be? And that would be like the good tie to Calibra as that comes into play, potentially.
Yeah, that's both great points. Yeah, those are really good points.
So back in the good old My Reports days, there was just repository, there was, folders full of reports that you could grab and alter yourself. Is there a way to do that sort of thing with Alteryx?
All right. Anybody who's more familiar with that portion of Alteryx than I am? Well, yeah, but any more systematically, I know within Alteryx you could save your own logic, and then you could bring it back in the formula tool. But I don't know if you could share that out. I'm not sure. But with this, like Josh said, at the very least, it's low tech, but you just copy, drop it in, or you could even open it, steal the code out of there if you want to embed it in somewhere else. So if you want to do your joins within a tool or something.
Ed Plus did an Alteryx macros presentation yesterday. Similar concept to this. Like each of these could ultimately be a macro that you can combine in different ways. So all the concepts that they probably talked about, I wasn't able to make it, probably also apply here as far as being able to change it, share it, etc.
So Michael was suggesting exactly the same thing for Alteryx with macros. So you guys didn't. Okay, we need to talk. So we should.
I can sing it, and that's good validation.
Yeah.
What about the idea of we would curate a list of here's the things that we would like Alteryx snippets for, and then as a community we could look at that list. If it's anything we think we have expertise, we could kind of sign up for it. Does that sound like it? All right. That'd be easy to do. Hold on, George.
I just have a quick question. So my experience with Alteryx is a little limited, but can you write queries between AUDB and Redshift? And if you can, how does the SQL translate to that as far as like the dialect? So it's just GUI, like it won't translate to.
It has to go. That's also, first of all, that's the whole power of Alteryx, is that it combines multiple data sources, including tables. But of course, yes, there's no magic. It has to bring that into memory. So you can bring in, if you have Redshift and or two different, databases, they have to bring it in memory. But yeah, you're basically writing code. You can imagine if you had a full, a programmer, you could do all this in code. So it's just a visual way, give you the sort of full power of which you can programming, but yeah.
Yeah, and I don't know where the line would be, but the thought is similar to object-oriented programming, is you keep it pretty small bits. If it's something that's super complicated, it's probably beyond a snippet, right? And so we'd probably want to keep it small chunks, would be my thought. All right, I have no concept of time. Where are we at with time? Are we? Okay. Well, thank you, everyone. This is great input. What I'll do is I'll put a follow-up note in the Alteryx channel, and anyone that wants to participate, please join in, and appreciate your time. Have a great rest of the day. Bye.